Greetings to you and welcome to the 26th session on the Gospel of John. I'm Timothy Muse, lead pastor here at St. Paul's Lutheran Church in Alliance, Ohio, and it's a joy to be with you today as we spend this time together. Whatever it is that you're doing, whenever it is that you're listening to this, whether you are just catching it as it's posted or whether you're catching it later on in the day or even weeks or months later, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being part of this. If this is helpful for you, if this is something that is giving you some direction or hope or visage or knowledge, I would encourage you to share it. You probably connected to it through one of our social media things here at the church, Facebook or Instagram. So I would encourage you to check it out, share it out with others so that they too can follow along and they too can connect with what we're doing and hopefully have their lives impacted and changed by this. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for being part of it. Thanks for sharing it out there. Tag me in it. Tag the church in it. Would love to see where you're at. Would love to see what part of the world you're paying attention to. If this is your first time, then welcome. Welcome to the sessions. I certainly would encourage you to go back and read through or listen to some of the previous ones. Listen to some of the previous sessions. We started at the beginning and we've been walking all the way through. And if you've been following along, then welcome back. Thanks for continuing to be part of this. Thanks for continuing to invest in the work that we do together. It is a joy. It is a wonderful piece to be able to be part of your life. So thank you for that. Thanks for being involved. Thank you for your investment. It's certainly a joy to know that people are paying attention to what the work that we're doing. So it's great to have you with us. Definitely have a Bible open before you, whether it's a printed copy or a digital copy. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you got. As long as you got something open, as long as you have something open before you so you can read it, you can follow along. We got a really good story coming up today that maybe you're familiar with, maybe you aren't, but it's got a lot of common pieces in it. So it's something that we're going to want to make sure that you're following along with. So have a Bible open so that you can read through things, you can hear, you can see the words. It's always important, I think, to have the Bible open. It's important to read the Bible every day. I know you hear me say this every time that we are together. Every time I'm on one of the sessions that we should be reading the Bible every day. And we should. We should be reading the Bible every day. We should be following along every day somewhere, opening the Word of God and letting the Word of God talk to us. And, you know, and I'll say this. I mean, we all have time to open Facebook. We all have time to open our email. We all have time to text someone. We have time to open the Bible. We don't have to have it open all day, but we have time to do it. So I would encourage you to open your Bible. I would encourage you to read the Bible and get into it every day. But I would encourage you certainly to have a Bible open before you. Now, we are in the Gospel of John, which is the fourth book of the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. So we have the Synoptics and then the Gospel of John. So I would encourage you to find that. The New Testament is the second half of the Bible. We're in chapter 9. So let's go there now as we begin our time looking at the Gospel of John. Okay, so this is chapter 9, verse 1. As he walked along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Jesus answered, "Neither the man nor his parents sinned. He was born blind, so that God's work might be revealed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world." When he had said this, he spat on the ground and made mud with his saliva and spread the mud on the man's eyes, saying to him, "Go wash in the pool of Siloam," which means sent. Then he went and washed and came back able to see. The neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar began to ask him, "Is this not the man who used to sit and beg?" Some were saying, "It is he." Others were saying, "No, but it is someone like him." He kept saying, "I am the man." But they kept asking him, "Then how were your eyes opened?" He answered, "The man called Jesus made mud, spread it on my eyes, and said to me, 'Go to Siloam and wash.' Then I went and washed and received my sight." They asked him, "Where is he?" And he said, "I do not know." All right, so this is the story of the blind man. We're very familiar with this story. This is a story that comes up often. You know, if you follow the lectionary, this story shows up every 3 years during Lent. And actually, as we enter into this Lenten season, I believe it is this year that we will have the long stories from the Gospel of John, Nicodemus and the woman at the well, and this one, and the story of Lazarus. But this is a very common story. Now, this is a story that happens at a different time. So what concluded at the end of chapter 8 concluded. So 8 ended. And this is a whole new circumstance. This is a different situation that Jesus is in. We really don't know a whole lot about where he is, or, and we read it says as he is walking along. So we could read it as he's just done, outside of the temple where we communicated last, or if this is just another circumstance where he's just walking along minding his own business. But whatever it is, he saw a man blind from birth. So Jesus is walking along and encounters this man blind from birth. Now we're going to find out that this encounter was not random, and it was not just an accident. We're going to find out that this encounter was, in fact, designed. It was set up. It was designed by God for a specific purpose. It was designed for a specific moment, because that's what the disciples asked. They say, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Now, I want us to think about something here for a minute. Now, this is, I know we're kind of like, what? That's kind of crazy. But this was Old Testament thinking, and in a lot of ways, it's still thinking for us today. God talks about the sins of the father passed upon the son, or the sins of the parent passed on the child. That's brought up in the Ten Commandments. So it's a question that has pervaded most of human existence. Why do bad things happen from birth? Why are kids born blind? Why are kids born with MS, or some kind of cognitive neuroabnormality, or what have you? Why are kids neurodivergent? Why are kids physical divergent? Why does this stuff happen? Well, throughout most of human history, it was believed one of two things: either they sinned, or their parents sinned. Now let's break that down. First, we're talking about, how can a baby sin? How can a baby sin? How can a newborn, sin to the caliber that, like, this guy's eyes weren't developed, or his ability to see wasn't developed? So this is an astounding question, astounding thought, that a baby pre-birth can sin. Well, that is brought in if you kind of throw in the idea of what's the word? If you throw in the idea of reincarnation, okay? So if you throw in the idea of reincarnation, where a soul is reincarnate in a body, it's very karmic, it's not very Christian or Judaic for that matter. But this idea that the sins of a past life are then being paid onto the present. That's one of the things that's kind of put in there. It's kind of built into the sides, but it's put in there. That the sins of a past life now come out onto a newborn. So now for us in our modern world, we're not going to really go down that road. But the other aspect is a baby born, and I don't want to use the word deformed. I don't want to use the word imperfect, because nobody's born perfect. But the question is, was this man born blind because he sinned, or his parents? Did his parents sin? And then that sin is passed on to the next generation. Again, we mentioned this with the Ten Commandments. That's what God says. I will repay to the fourth and fifth generation of I'm a jealous God who the sins of the father cast upon the son. So was this man born blind because something that his parents did? Well, maybe not spiritually. And we find out that Jesus answers this. Neither was this man born blind because his parents sinned. Neither this man nor his parents sinned. He was born blind so that God's work might be revealed in him. All right, so we know that this man is born blind because God is going to do something with it. But I don't want to step off of the sins of the parent cast upon the kids, because we see that happen all the time. We see the sins of the parents cast upon the kid, and not some kind of spiritual thing. And this is what I want to make clear. Please stay with me on this. This is what I want to make clear. It is not a spiritual thing. It is not a God is punishing the parents by putting or punishing the kids by casting along the sins of the parents. No, but the sins of the parents can actually have an effect on the kids. Okay, so someone is drinking or drinking alcohol or smoking or bad vitamins or stress during pregnancy. That all imprints on the kid. Drug use. We've seen, drug addicted babies that grow up because their parents use drugs. We see how poor nutrition or poor health or poor sleep or poor exercise, all of these things are sins of the parents that are passed along to the kids. And some of them can result in things like blindness or neurodivergence and lack of full development of the brain. So yes, it does happen. It can happen where parents can pass their sins on to their children. And thank goodness we're becoming more and more aware of that reality. We're becoming more and more aware of the passing of energy and the passing of things from parent to child. So that's really a good thing. I'm really happy for that we're seeing this in our culture. But Jesus says no. I mean, it's neither the parent nor the children that have sinned that have caused this man to be born blind. This man was born blind so that the work of God could be revealed in him. This man being born blind is actually blind so that the work of God, so that God's work in the world will be revealed to him, so that God's glory and power will come forth. Again, if we look at the work of Jesus so far, it's been all about his ability, and I don't want to use the word manipulate, but his ability to alter the physical state of things. Think it through: turning water into wine, raising the child from the dead, being able to peer into the life of the woman at the well. All of these things are Jesus' ability to rework the created order. And this is yet one more place. We need to see that Jesus has the power over the physical world. And so, and the only way that that's going to happen is if someone is blind. And so God designed that this person was born blind so that they would have this interaction with Jesus. One of their primary purposes in the world is to have an interaction with Jesus. Now, before we want to go down the road that's unfair on God's account, there is no unfairness with God. God chooses and God is justified in any choice. Because we live under the rubric of grace and the massive rubric of grace, because we all deserve punishment even though we get grace, there's nothing, my brothers and sisters, that is unfair to God. This person had a purpose, and their purpose was to be a vehicle of revelation for God. And that's what he was. Born blind, ran into Jesus. This is no accident. We always need to make sure we're clear that Jesus doesn't have accidents. There is no coincidence with the maker of heaven and earth. We really want to lean more into the idea that Jesus was seeking out the blind man, was walking along with the intention of running into the blind man, with the intention of healing the blind man to show God's work in the world. And that's what he says. Look, we must work the works of him who sent me. The works of him who sent me are the work of God in the world. Jesus has come to do the work of God in the world so that the people will recognize him and acknowledge that he has the power of God. It is only then that he is able to do what he truly came to do, and that is die for the world, sacrifice, the crucifixion and resurrection. But that isn't going to have any power if they're not recognizing him as some kind of messianic figure. So Jesus needs to show these things. He needs to do these things, and that's what he's doing. That's what he's doing. He comes along and says, we must do the work that must be done. We must do the work of him who sent me while it is day. Now, keep in mind, this is definitely a world where there is no electric light. Oil is very expensive. Light is very expensive. So you worked when you were during the day and you slept at night. That was it. When the workday was done, maybe you had a little bit of light to light your little hut while you ate or what have you. But then you went to sleep. You went to bed and you slept until just before dawn. Then you woke up, you had a little something to eat, and then you went to work. As soon as you could work, you worked. And you worked till you couldn't work anymore. That's how it was. So Jesus says, look, as long as I'm in the world, it's day. I'm here. It's time to go to work. So while I'm here, we are going to do the work that God has sent me to do. No one can work at night because no one can see. I mean, it's just it's a tactical reality. You can't see at night. You can't see when the light is gone. So you do the work while the light is present. Again, and this is kind of foreign for us because we have this beautiful, wonderful thing called the electric light bulb. So we can work all night. I mean, we can work outside all night. You see road crews with them big lamps shining and everything. We can work all night because we have artificial light. But that's not the way it is in the ancient world. The ancient world doesn't have artificial light, so the ancient world needs the light of the sun. And when the light goes down, that's it. The day's over. The work is done. So Jesus says, we as in us, we as in the group, we as in the called ones, and some of the interpreters say I, referring specifically to Jesus. But John really kind of encompasses the disciples into the mission, because this isn't solely a singular mission. This is a mission about Jesus and about the work that Jesus is doing together, just as much as this is a mission about the Messiah himself. So Jesus says, look, we must do the work we have to do together. We must do it together. While it is day, before that night comes when no one can work. As long as I'm in the world, I'm the light of the world. Again, playing on that vision of light and darkness. And Jesus says, look, as long as I'm here, I'm the light. I am the one that's illuminating the world. But that's not always going to be the case. There will be a time when I'm not here anymore. So when that time comes, it will be a different light. It will be the light of the Holy Spirit. It will be the light of the early church. So Jesus says, look, this guy is born blind so that you can see that I have the power to fix it. I have the power to undo this. That is the point, my lovely friends. I have the power to undo this so that you can see that I have the power to undo it, and that's what he does. So after he does this stuff, he spits on the ground and made mud with his saliva and spread it on the man's eyes. Now, why are we doing this? What is up with the pomp and the circumstance? What is up with all of this? This is not necessary. Jesus can just be like, you're healed, and that's that. Well, there's a lot of superstition. There's a lot of magical power around spit. The spit of a healer, the spit of witches, the spit of prophets. I mean, all of this. So Jesus is in some ways, he's kind of mocking the tradition, but he's also kind of stepping on the heads of those who claim to have it. So if Jesus doesn't do something, then everybody's going to think that it was a fake, that it was all set up. And actually, they think it anyway, as we're going to see in a few minutes. However, right now, he's kind of playing into this mystic prophet reality by spitting on the ground and making mud and slathering it on the man's eyes, kind of the whole mud pack ritual thing that looks like something that any kind of healer would do. And then he says to go and wash in the pool of Siloam. He says, go and wash in the pool of Siloam. Now, the pool of Siloam is it means sent. And go and wash the mud off. Go and wash the spit off. Now, there's a couple reasons why this has power. One of the reasons why this has power is because, the water was sacred. The pool was sacred. So this was ascending to a sacred pool. The other thing is this guy's going to be walking along with these mud packs on his eyes. People recognize him. People know who he is. And some are going to see him with these mud packs on his eyes. So they're going to see that something is happening. This is going to be visual reinforcement of the miracle, which, the deeper and deeper Jesus gets, the more and more he needs that. He needs that visual reinforcement because people are going to start, they're already becoming uncomfortable. The Pharisees are already looking for a way to kill him. They're going to start to publicly speak out against him. So sooner or later, there has to be some like physical buy-in, some visual buy-in. So that's what this is. This is visual buy-in. This is the blind man having some visual buy-in, there's some vision to this, and that's what Jesus wants. Jesus wants the people to be like seeing him walking around with the mud pack so that they believe it. Because this guy's was blind from birth, but in a lot of ways, now again, and I don't want to sound I don't even know what the word I'm looking for. I don't want to sound critical. I don't want to sound negative. But unless someone is born like with deformed eyes, where their eyes are actually physically deformed, it's very hard to tell if someone's blind or not. It really is. Now, watch them long enough and you will know, because our body instinctively will avoid things and over. But you could have someone who's a really good a really good trickster and fake it. All right. So Jesus needs some physical reinforcement here. So he packs the mud on the guy's eyes and he sends him for a walk. Because and really, quite frankly, if the man is not blind, then having his eyes packed with mud, he's not going to go anywhere. He's going to stumble. He's going to fall down. So this is all a play from Jesus to really do a lot of proof texting with the man being born blind. It's also a way for him to really combat this whole saliva mentality, this whole, super healer mentality, all that kind of stuff. So off he goes. Go and wash in the pool of Siloam, which means send. Then he went and washed and came back and was able to see. Well, it's kind of funny because we see nothing about the miracle. I mean, we have all this lead up, all of this preparation, and he goes and washes and he's made clean. So what actually happens, we don't know, and that's the point. We don't know how the miracles of God work out. We're not supposed to. We just know that it happens. And we see this often within the scriptural study where we'll have such a build-up to something massive and it just happens. He goes and washed and he's able to see. Now, the neighbors and those who had seen him before begging asked, "Is not this the man who used to sit and beg?" So there's this transformation. People notice it. People pay attention to it. Isn't this the guy that was sitting and begging? He claimed to be blind. Some say yeah, some say no, but it's someone who looked like him. And he kept saying, "It is I. It is I." Now they knew why he was begging. They knew he was begging because he was blind. He couldn't see. And in that time period, there wasn't the option for a blind person to go to work at one of the major corporations that would have a job for a blind person to do. You couldn't work in manufacturing or what have you. You couldn't work at all. You couldn't see, couldn't plant crops, you couldn't, tie leather, you couldn't do any of that. So you had to sit and beg. You had to live off the generosity of others. And so here he is, he was begging, but he can now see, which is unprecedented. It's unheard of to do this. I mean, really, the question comes down to not you're being made well, but were you ever blind to begin with? So they see him up. Some say it's him. Some say it looks like him. But he keeps saying, "No, it's me. It's me. I'm the one that used to sit there and beg, and now I don't have to anymore." And they asked him, "How is it then that your eyes were opened? How did you gain your sight? How did you, after all of these years of convincing us that you couldn't see, how did you gain your sight?" And he said, "The man called Jesus made mud, spread it on my eyes, and said to me, 'Go to Siloam and wash.' Then I went and washed and received my sight." They said to him, "Where is he?" He said, "I do not know." So they want to know. They want to know what happened, how this works. I don't know. He just told me to do it, and I went and did it. Now, look here, folks. I know that sounds kind of odd. We're not supposed to just follow along and do what people tell us to do, especially strangers. But when you're blind all of your life and you sit and beg all day and someone tells you to do this, look, what do you have to lose? Except maybe 10 minutes walking to the pool of Siloam and washing your face. What do you have to lose? You're going to get ridiculed anyway. You're going to be questioned anyway. People are going to ignore you anyway. This man has nothing to lose by doing what Jesus tells him to do. Nothing. Except his blindness. That's the only thing he has left to lose is his blindness. So he goes and does it. He goes and washes. And guess what? He gets his sight back. And then so they ask him, "How is this possible? How did you get your sight back?" Clearly he had proven over the years that he was blind. And look, we can all play the blind game until we're almost ready to walk into a telephone pole and then we avoid it. Because our eyes are open and we can see everything going on around us, even if we're pretending to be blind. There's having a part and then there's buying into the part. And really, as an adult, to spend all of your life blind, To convince people you're blind just so you can sit and beg, boy, that's a heavy price to pay, and that's a heavy thing to buy into. So they all knew he was blind. His blindness wasn't in question. The question was, how did his eyes get open? How did he get sight back? And he answers directly. It was the man Jesus. He made mud, he put it on my eyes, and now I can see. And so their response is, where is he? Where did he go? The man's like, I don't know. I was off the pool of Siloam. I was getting my face washed. I don't know where he went to. He disappeared. He took off. And really, quite frankly, keep this in mind. The blind man doesn't even know what Jesus looks like. Because when he left Jesus, he was still blind with mud packs on his eyes. So he could be standing right next to the blind man. The blind man wouldn't know because the blind man has no idea what he looks like. The only thing the blind man would recognize is the sound of his voice because Jesus spoke to him, and that voice probably penetrated deep into his soul. But as to what Jesus looked like or where Jesus went, he has no idea. And we really don't either. And it's fascinating because we have this huge run-up as to why the man is blind. We have this huge run-up as to how he became blind. But his healing, his miracle, was just like boom, boom, boom. That's how it works. God works, God moves, God heals. That's it. It's done. Because no matter how long we try to figure out what happened, we never will. So there's no point in trying. We accept that this man was blind, that Jesus healed him, and that he is not blind anymore. Did Jesus need the mud pack? Did Jesus need to send the man to the pool of Siloam? No, he didn't. He did so that those around him could see that he was doing something different, something out of the ordinary. So, verse 13, they brought to the Pharisees the man who had been formerly blind. Now it was the Sabbath day when Jesus made the mud and opened his eyes. Then the Pharisees also began to ask him how he had received his sight. He said to them, he put mud on my eyes, then I washed, and now I see. Some of the Pharisees said, this man is not from God, for he does not observe the Sabbath. But others say, how can a man who is a sinner perform such signs? They were divided, so they said again to the blind man, what do you say about him? It was your eyes he opened. He said, he is a prophet. So it doesn't end there, okay? So now we have to involve the higher-ups, the Pharisees. So they take the man who was blind to the Pharisees. The Pharisees are the law bearers. They are the ones that oversee the right interpretation and ritual of the law. So they go to the Pharisees because something just isn't right here. This is really life-changing, and this is really kind of problematic for everybody involved because now you have this Jesus fellow who brings this power, a power that is, for a lot of people, disconcerting. So they brought to the Pharisees the man formerly born blind. Now, and here's the deal. It was the Sabbath day when Jesus made the mud and opened his eyes. This is a problem, at least in the eyes of the Pharisees, because this is considered work. Now the Pharisees are kind of liking this problem because now they can use something to discredit Jesus with. You see, you don't work on the Sabbath. You don't do work on the Sabbath unless, of course, you're God and you created the Sabbath, so then you can work whenever you darn well please. And that's what Jesus does. He does whatever he darn well pleases. And he heals the man on the Sabbath. He makes the mud and puts it on his eyes on the Sabbath. Because the Sabbath, though it is important, you would never hear me saying that the Sabbath isn't important, that rest isn't important. But when something, there are things that supersede rest. And healing someone supersedes rest. Ask any doctor or nurse or someone who works in the front lines. Ask a paramedic or a firefighter who gets a call on a Sunday afternoon or a Sabbath afternoon, whether your Sabbath is Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, whatever your Sabbath is. They're going to go to work because there are some things more important than rest, and they take rest elsewhere. But the Pharisees are seeing this as an issue. It was the Sabbath day when Jesus did this. So the Pharisees also began to ask him how he received his sight. They want another account. This is good interrogation technique. You ask the question over and over again, and you look for a change in the answer. So they're interrogating him. They're asking him over and over again. They want to see if the answer changes. How did this happen? He's like, I don't know. He made mud. He put it in my eyes. I went and washed, and I was made clean. I could see. Some of the Pharisees, and then they were divided over this. Some of the Pharisees said, this man is not from God. He does not observe the Sabbath. So Jesus' very act of not observing the Sabbath is what precludes him from being of God. Okay? So because Jesus healed on the Sabbath, he is clearly not from God. That's the conclusion. Now keep in mind that though God is specific about Sabbath observation, it was the Pharisees and the Sadducees who set up such a strict understanding of the Sabbath, such a strict working of the Sabbath, that Jesus is not denying the Sabbath. Jesus is standing opposed to what the Pharisees and scribes have created as appropriate for the Sabbath. Very different reality. Very different reality when it comes to our understanding of Sabbath rest and Sabbath interaction. The Pharisees Jesus is not standing against God's Sabbath. He's standing against the Pharisees' Sabbath. And the Pharisees don't like it. Because look here, most people lived in fear of the Pharisees and the Sadducees because they didn't want to get kicked out of the temple. Most people were afraid that they would get kicked out of the temple, so they did what they were told because they didn't want to get kicked out of the temple, thus being kicked out of God's presence. Well, clearly, Jesus is not concerned with either getting kicked out of the temple or God's presence because Jesus can't get kicked out of himself. Okay? He can't get kicked out of his own being, just like any of us can't get kicked out of our own being. So Jesus is unconcerned with the Pharisees' definition of the Sabbath. He is far more concerned with his understanding and God's understanding of what healing and importance is in the world. So that's where Jesus goes. That's the direction that Jesus takes. Others say, how can a man who is a sinner perform such signs? So others recognize that this man has power. Others recognize that there's power in what he does and ask, how is it that a sinner could do such things? Because no one who's that far from God has the power of God. And why would a demon, and this is the thing, demons don't better life, okay? Demons make them worse. The devil isn't going to free the blind man and give him his sight. The devil would take the blind man and make him mute too. That's how the devil works. So this man getting his sight is definitely a God thing. This is a God moment, not a devil moment, even if people want to make it a devil moment. You look at the presence of evil. Evil doesn't make someone's life better. Evil makes someone's life worse. So there are some who are saying, how can this man not be from God? How can this man be a sinner and yet wield the power of God? They were divided. So the vaunted, the great big Pharisees and all of their huffing and puffing, they turn back to the blind man. And they say, well, it was your sight he gave. What do you think? And the guy's like, what are you asking me for? I don't know. He's a prophet. He clearly has the power of God. He clearly has the ability to wield the power of God. Which, that's what they see in a prophet. They see a prophet have the capability of doing that. And keep in mind that there's really no messianic conversation taking place right now. The Pharisees are kind of squelching any Messiah conversation. So clearly this guy has power from God. Well, what is he? He's got to be a prophet because that's what prophets have. He claims to be a prophet. He professes Jesus to be a prophet. He doesn't really have any other language. And what does he know? He was blind, now he can see. It was this man Jesus who did it by putting mud on my eyes and sending me to what do you want me to say? I don't care. I'll say whatever you want me to say. I still got my sight back. And that is an incredible thing. I got my sight for the first time. Could you imagine what that would be like? Could you imagine what that would be like? Blind all your life. You interpret the world through your touch and through your ears and through your other senses. And then all of a sudden, one day, your eyes are opened. You can see everything. How immense that would be. How incredible that would be to have that ability. And we don't know. I mean, was he legally blind? Was he completely blind? We don't know, but we interpret and we run that he was completely blind. Why should we believe anything other? Because that's what the scriptures tell us. They tell us that he was born blind. He was born without the ability for sight. So just imagine the conundrum this puts the Pharisees in, okay? This puts them in a really tight pickle as leaders. If they've already been trying to silence him, they've already been trying to push Jesus to the corners, and we've seen that a little bit last, in the last chapter and the chapter before. But now this is something far different. This is truly power of God, and this is truly power of God enacted on the Sabbath. So if they try to discredit him, to hold on to their power over the Sabbath, then they're playing a really dangerous game of the possibility of exiling a prophet or the Messiah, of pushing God's representative in their midst to the corner because he's not obeying their understanding of the Sabbath. And if they acquiesce to him and acknowledge his power, then he is working on the Sabbath, which is why they're divided. They don't want to make a decision because whatever decision they make, it's not necessarily going to wind up being a successful or positive one. Somebody's going to lose in this. So that's why they go back to the blind man, pin it on him. So if their system is questioned, they can put it back on the blind man. And that's what they do. They go back to the blind man and ask him, what do you think? What is your opinion? So then we can take your opinion and use it as a touchstone to protect ourselves. I mean, keep in mind, for the most part, the Pharisees saw that the role of the people was to have a relationship with God, but that relationship was defined and directed by them, by their expectations. The Pharisees laid out what was expected in a relationship with God. That was who they were. That was their job, was to lay out this expectation of what a relationship with God was all about. And so the Pharisees, they don't want to see Jesus performing these things. They don't want to see Jesus successful. They want to see Jesus discredited so that they can hold on to whatever power, whatever force that they want to, or that they're going to hold on to. That's the whole point. That's what the Pharisees want to do. And so they find themselves facing Jesus in a really, really difficult situation because Jesus is putting them in a moment where they're not sure how to overcome this. And Jesus is pretty good about that. He's pretty good about creating pickle situations where people don't know how to get out of. I'm always fascinated when Jesus does that. He creates these circumstances where they think that they've trapped him when ultimately he has trapped them, and not just trapped them, but really, really trapped them into a bind circumstance and situation. I love when that happens. That's really one of the great things I see in all of in all of Jesus' work, is when he binds people like that. It really is a fascinating thing. So now the Pharisees have to find themselves in a different direction. Now the Pharisees have to figure out a different way to go in order to deal more fully with this, in order to make sure that this gets taken care of the way it's supposed to. In order to save their own power, in order to save their own skin. That's what the Pharisees have to do. So what they do is they go in another direction. They go in a different way, and they come to the parents, and they seek out information from the parents. And here's so this is verse 18 to 23. The Jews did not believe that he had been blind and had received his sight until they called the parents of the man who had received his sight and asked them, "Is this your son, who you say was born blind? How then does he now see?" The parents answered, "We know that this is our son and that he was born blind, but we do not know how it is that he sees. Nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him. He is of age. He will speak for himself." His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jews, for the Jews had already agreed that anyone who confessed Jesus to be the Messiah would be put out of the synagogue. Therefore his parents said, "He is of age. Ask him." So they don't want to accept that he was healed. They don't want to accept that he was healed on the Sabbath. They don't want to give up their power, their authority, their place. So what's the next play? Well, this guy was faking it all along, wasn't he? So let's discredit the blind man. That's where they go. They go in the direction of discrediting the blind man. They don't want to give the blind man any credit, because so what they do is they approach the parents. And they say to the parents, is this your son who was born blind? Let's make sure that this isn't an imposter or someone who's having a little bit of fun. I guess in some ways we would want proof verification. We probably would do the same thing in our world today if we were in that circumstance, where we would want proof that this person was blind and that he was born blind and all that kind of stuff, yada, yada, yada. So they call the parents in, bring the parents in to, first question, is this your son who you say was born blind? And they say, yeah, this is our son who we say was born blind. This is our boy. We testify to that. We verify that. So now the Pharisees have to acknowledge that they're actually dealing with someone who was born blind and now has their sight. So now the Pharisees can't ignore the possibility. They have to acknowledge that this is what they're dealing with. So now they have to figure out how or who to blame. If they can prove a blasphemy somewhere, if they can prove a demonic possession somewhere, if they can prove black magic somewhere, then they can write this all off, and this isn't God's work, and the Sabbath is safe, and their power is safe, and everything is fine. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to cover their own posh tukuses, if you will. So first they ask whether he is the son who was born blind, and they say, yeah, we know this is our son. We know that he was born blind, but we don't know how his eyes were open. We weren't there for that. We weren't part of that. We weren't involved in that. You can't ask us for something that we don't know about. And that's what they're saying. They're saying, look, we don't know. Ask him. He is of age. He can testify for himself. Don't make us say something we don't know about. Because look, they didn't want to get kicked out of the synagogue. They didn't want to lose their relationship with God. And that was the threat for anybody who claimed anything about Jesus. The threat was you're going to get kicked out of the synagogue. The threat was you're going to be thrown away. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants to lose their relationship with God. So, of course, they're going to be like, look, you got to ask him. He's of age. He is at a place in his life where he can speak for himself. Ask him, and he will testify to it. We don't know what happened. We weren't there. We know this is our son, and we know that he was born blind. That's all we know. And that's all they say. Which, you know, it really, quite frankly, in my humble opinion, that is an art and a lesson that far more people need to learn. You know, you speak on the facts, and then you leave it at that. A lot of people want to draw conclusions, make assumptions, what have you. These parents don't do that. Now, they're terrified of the Jews. They're terrified they're going to get kicked out of the temple. Which, again, you know, here's the thing. Here's the thing. If you want to talk about whose power is at stake here, the Pharisees agreed that anybody who speaks of Jesus as the Messiah gets kicked out of the synagogue. Think about that. Think about that. Now, why would you do that? Why would you kick people out of the synagogue for talking about Jesus as the Messiah? Because you recognize Jesus has power. If Jesus didn't have power, who cares? But the Pharisees are so afraid of giving up their power. They're so afraid of seeing the status quo change. Partly because the Romans don't want to see the status quo change, and partly because they lose their own comfort. So part of it's self-preservation, and part of it's protection of the people. But if God has come to do this, God's got this figured out. God's got this figured out. We have to trust that. God's got this figured out. At any rate, so they ask, is this your son? And they're like, yeah, he's our son, and he is born blind, but we don't know how he got his sight back, because we just know that he's our son. We don't know how he got his sight back. They were so terrified of being thrown out of the synagogue that they wouldn't even say what their son said. Their son probably said, hey, this Jesus fellow gave me my sight back. They wouldn't even repeat that because they're so afraid of getting thrown out of the synagogue. They're so afraid of getting thrown out of God's presence that they're not willing, that they're not able to do this. So here they are in a pickle, in a bind. We got the man that was born blind. His parents have already verified that he was born blind, and now he has gotten healed because of Jesus on the Sabbath. Whatever are they going to do? My friends, this is where we're going to leave it for today, so that we're going to pick it up next week. We're still in the middle of the tale. We still have a lot left to talk about what Jesus is going to do and how this is going to all blossom out. As always, my contact information is going to come up at the end of this section. If you have any questions or thoughts, or if you're confused about anything, please feel free to reach out to me, and I'll do the best I can to answer any questions, clear up any issues, or what have you. As always, thanks for being part of this. Thanks for participating, and we will see you next week for the next session on the Gospel of John. Take care.